My hands were shaking so badly that the tray almost slipped from my fingers. 20 of my closest relatives sat around that long dinner table, laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating a birthday, my birthday. And I was standing there in an apron, serving them appetizers like a waitress in my own home. Nobody noticed the tremble in my wrists. Nobody noticed the way I kept my eyes down, afraid that if I looked up, the tears would finally fall. My sister-in-law sat at the head of the table, in my chair, telling everyone about her new promotion, her new car, her new life. And every few minutes, she'd glance at me and say, "Can you refill the water, sweetie? You're so good at this." I smiled. I always smiled. That was the only thing I had left to control. But then the front door opened, and an old woman walked in, uninvited, unannounced. And what she said next made the entire room go silent. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what happens tonight changes everything. And if this story touches something in you, hit like and follow along, because stories like this deserve to be heard, not hidden. My name is Amara. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 6 years I've been married into a family that never once said thank you. It wasn't always like this. When I first married Daniel, his family seemed warm enough. His mother was kind, in her own quiet way. But his younger sister, Celine, never liked me. She thought her brother deserved someone with more money, more status, more shine. Celine had a way of making every room feel smaller when she walked in. She'd correct the way I folded napkins. She'd comment on my cooking in front of guests. Small things, at first. Things I told myself I was imagining. 3 years ago, Daniel's father got sick. Medical bills piled up fast, faster than anyone expected. I took a second job at a small accounting firm, working nights after my regular shift, just to help cover the costs. I never told anyone. Not even Daniel knew the full amount I was quietly sending to his parents every month. There's one detail I've never told a single soul. For 8 months, I skipped my own lunch breaks at work and used that time and that money to pay off a private debt for someone in this very family. Someone who never knew it was me. Someone who is sitting at this table tonight. Daniel is a good man in most ways. He loves me. But he has one weakness. He cannot stand conflict, especially with his sister. So whenever Salim crossed a line, he'd just say, "Let it go, Amara. It's not worth the fight." And I did. Every single time, I let it go. Tonight was supposed to be different. It was my 40th birthday, and Daniel had actually promised, that this year, I would just sit and enjoy it. No cooking, no cleaning. Just family and cake, and maybe, for once, feeling celebrated. But 3 hours before the guests arrived, Celine showed up early. She walked straight into my kitchen and said the food didn't look presentable enough for her friends who were coming. Before I could respond, she'd already handed me an apron. "You're better at this than me anyway," she said, smiling that smile. "Let the professionals handle the greeting, okay?" I looked at Daniel. He looked away. So I put on the apron. I told myself it was one night. I told myself I could survive one more night of shrinking myself so everyone else could feel comfortable. She didn't know it yet, but somebody in that room already knew the truth about her. And that truth was walking through the front door in exactly 4 minutes. By the time dessert was being served, Celine had taken over the entire evening. She'd moved my birthday cake to the side table and put a tray of her own homemade pastries in the center instead. She stood up, tapped her glass, and began a toast, not to me, but to herself, thanking everyone for supporting her incredible year. I stood near the kitchen doorway, tray in hand, watching my own birthday become her spotlight. And that's when the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting straight through her speech. Daniel's mother frowned. Who could that be? I set the tray down slowly. My hands were still shaking. Something in the air had shifted, though I couldn't explain why. I walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. and when I opened it, I found myself face to face with someone I hadn't seen in months. Mrs. Whitfield, our elderly neighbor, standing there in her long gray coat, holding a small folder against her chest. Her eyes scanning the room behind me until they landed directly on Celine. Mrs. Whitfield stepped past me without waiting to be invited in. The room fell quiet, 20 conversations dying at once. She walked straight toward the table, her eyes fixed on Celine, and set the folder down in front of her with a soft, deliberate thud. "I wasn't going to come tonight," Mrs. Whitfield said, her voice steady despite her age. "But I saw the party lights from my window and I thought, someone here deserves to know the truth before this year ends." Celine's smile faltered for the first time all evening. "Mrs. Pym Whitfield, this really isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." The old woman's voice was calm, but it carried. "3 years ago, you borrowed $40,000 from me. For your business. You promised to pay it back within a year." Gasps moved through the table like a wave. Daniel's mother put a hand to her chest. Daniel himself sat frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. "You stopped answering my calls," Mrs. Whitfield continued. "You stopped visiting. I thought I'd lost that money for good. I thought I'd lost a friend too." Celine's face had gone pale. "I was going to pay you back. I just needed more time." "You didn't need more time." Mrs. Whitfield opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Because 6 months ago someone paid the entire debt off. Every dollar. Anonymously." The room was silent enough to hear the candles flickering on the untouched birthday cake. "I spent weeks trying to find out who did it," Mrs. Whitfield said. "The bank finally told me, after I insisted. It was a series of small transfers made quietly over 8 months. From someone who never once asked for credit or thanks or even acknowledgement." She turned then and looked directly at me, still standing by the kitchen doorway in my apron. "It was Amara." Nobody moved. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me, and for the first time all night, I didn't look away. "She used her lunch breaks," Mrs. Whitfield said, quieter now but somehow even louder. "She skipped meals. She worked a second job most of you didn't even know about. And she used every spare dollar to quietly clean up a mess she didn't create so that an old woman wouldn't lose her savings, and so that a family she loved wouldn't fall apart from shame." Celine's eyes filled with tears, and for once, they weren't performance tears. "Amara," she said, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" I set my tray down on the counter, slow and deliberate. "Because it was never about you knowing," I said. "It was about making sure Mrs. Whitfield didn't lose what she'd worked her whole life for. That's it. That's the whole reason." Daniel finally stood up, walking toward me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. "Amara, I didn't know any of this. I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. And I meant it. He hadn't known. But not knowing wasn't the same as paying attention, and some part of both of us understood that now. Celine stood up slowly, her hands trembling now instead of mine. She walked around the table and stopped in front of me, and for a long moment, she just looked at me. Really looked. Maybe for the first time since I'd married into this family. "I've spent years making you feel small," she said. "And you spent that same time quietly saving my life. I don't know how to sit with that." "You don't have to figure it out tonight," I said. "But maybe you can start by sitting down. It's still my birthday." She laughed, a short, broken laugh, and wiped her eyes. "Take your seat back, please." For the first time all evening, I walked to the head of the table and I sat down. Daniel's mother reached over and squeezed my hand. Mrs. Whitfield gave me a small, knowing smile before quietly letting herself out, her purpose there complete. Celine spent the rest of the night unusually quiet, refilling water glasses herself without being asked. She didn't become a different person overnight. Growth rarely works that fast. But something shifted in that room, a small crack in years of arrogance, and sometimes that crack is where change finally gets in. I blew out my candles a little after 10 that night, surrounded by people who finally saw me, not as the help, not as the quiet one, but as someone whose kindness had been paying for their comfort all along, without asking for anything back. Dignity was never something Celine could take from me. She could ignore it, overlook it, even mock it. But she couldn't erase it. And in the end, it was the very thing that spoke the loudest, louder than any toast, any promotion, any new car ever could. If you believe that quiet kindness always finds its way to the light, comment, "Grace wins" below. And if this story reminded you of your own worth, even when others forget to see it, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight.